Okay. Almost always, something to notice about this is that almost always the value of investing today will be greater than this. And the reason the value of investing today will be greater than this is because somebody, how did that investment arise? Somebody received a random idea. If the random idea has a cost less than the threshold, then you're making positive profit. V over R minus C less than the threshold is positive. So almost always, the person who ends up investing in this problem, if he is in fact implementing the optimal cost threshold, will end up making positive profit, and then the game is over. Okay. The main result here, the third bullet point, the main result here is that the optimized value function, that is the V tilde, is decreasing, which implies from the first order condition that the optimal cost threshold is increasing. So why is so think about search theory. So there are certain elements of this that have something in common with labor search models. I don't know of any labor search models that consider that the searcher is learning about lambda over time, but that's one of the main differences between this and labor search models. But put that aside, if this were a labor search model where the lambda were known, then the value of continuing this V would be stationary in time. And the reason is, if the lambda is known, every day is a new day. Conditional on arriving at T without having had a success, the probability of having a good idea in the next time period, that is exactly the same problem as when you started 15 years ago. It's stationary. And because the problem is stationary, the value function is stationary. Because the value function is stationary, the optimal cost threshold is stationary. It's a value, not a function. End of story. That's familiar to people who do labor search models. The only thing added here about it is that the value of weighting, the value increases with the hit rate of ideas. So because the value of continuing, the value of waiting increases with the hit rate of ideas, you're much more willing to wait if the ideas are coming rapidly. Invest in something that has high cost if the ideas are coming rapidly. The only thing it adds here is it says in a stationary environment where the lambda is known, the optimal policy will be a stationary policy. It will be a stationary cost threshold. But it does depend on lambda. It does depend on the hit rate of ideas. And where ideas are very, very scarce, that is, the lambda is low, you're willing to tolerate very high cost. The C is very, very high when lambda is very, very low. And the C is very, very low when lambda is very, very high, because the trade-off between cost and delay depends on the lambda. So that one of the results in this paper is, rewards to innovation should increase if ideas are very, very scarce. And that's not something you see, that's not something that comes out, because there's no concept of the scarcity of ideas. That's not an idea that's not a conclusion that comes out of the more usual model, because it's not equipped to ask that question. So here, the thing that conceptualizing that the investment opportunities themselves are random and scarce allows you to come to a different conclusion about how to set rewards. And it's not really coming to a conclusion that's focused on the resources side of it. It's a conclusion that's focused on, gee, where are these investment opportunities coming from, and how available are they? Okay, but when the lambda is unknown, when the planner is learning about the hit rate of ideas, then it's a slightly different problem. It's a non-stationary problem, because as the planner's belief about the hit rate of ideas is changing in time, he's becoming more and more pessimistic. Now, that's not entirely obvious, by the way. The way in which the planner's belief changes in time depends, as I said, on the cost threshold that came before, because that determines, because he knows that ideas are being received and thrown away, and so his beliefs are having to reflect that. So it's not entirely obvious exactly what's happening with his beliefs. But what is true, what we prove in the paper, is that regardless of the cost threshold, for an arbitrary cost threshold that's implemented, as time passes, the planner becomes more and more pessimistic about lambda in two senses. The second one follows from the first. In the sense that his conditional distribution on lambda at a later time is stochastically dominated by his conditional distribution on lambda at the previous time. And of course, that implies that his expected value of lambda also changes monotonically. Okay, so what is happening here? The planner, as time passes, is becoming more and more pessimistic about lambda. He's becoming more and more, as time passes, and there's no viable idea. Whatever the cost threshold was that he implemented, whatever it was, he's becoming more and more pessimistic about lambda. And what does that mean? Having experienced a long delay, he expects to have even more long delay. So that means that he should be becoming more willing to accept high cost, because in the trade-off between cost and delay, he should be willing to accept cost rather than delay, because he expects a lot of delay. So that's the intuitive reason. So what's happening here is, as time goes on, the value, the optimized value function, the optimized value of weighting is declining. And the way to implement the optimal policy then is to be willing to take higher and higher cost ideas. Okay, so that's very intuitive, I think. Now, I haven't said anything yet about what you do with the ideas if you don't invest. So, I mean, just as in our lives as academics, you know, when you wake up on Saturday morning, you think, wow, there's a good idea. I could work on growth theory, whatever. Nobody thought of this growth theory. What do you do with those ideas? The fact is, for most people, we throw them away. You know, either you don't have the tools to do it, you don't want to make an investment in the literature, you don't have a student, you know, who wants to do that topic. Most of them you just throw away. But some of them, for most academics I know have a reservoir of ideas to work on that they haven't yet gotten around to working on. And you can do that in commerce too. You can bank the idea. I call that banking the idea. You put it in your pocket. Now, in a broader model, you would be banking it for many reasons. One is that the economic environment might be changing. Those ideas, the mere fact that you have those ideas is valuable. You don't want to give them away. They're valuable in commerce just as they're valuable to us as academics. One reason you bank it is because you know you could implement the idea. This is true in lots of applied theory problems. You know that you could implement the idea, but you know you're going to have to read a lot of literature. You're going to maybe have to learn a branch of mathematics you didn't know before. You know, you have to learn you haven't thought about dynamic optimization for the last 5 years. You're going to have to read some optimization, but you know, it's costly. So, you know, and anyway, nobody's thinking about this idea. The stakes aren't that high, but hey, 6 years from now, maybe it becomes a topic on the agenda, somebody's agenda. People are interested. Maybe you've learned the skills. The rewards are going to be higher because it's on somebody's agenda. You may pick this up and work on it again. Same thing happens in commerce. I think this is a very important part of how innovation occurs. So I'm going to think about the idea of banking ideas. So now two things can happen with your idea. You can throw it away when you have this idea on Saturday morning, or you can put it in your pocket. That changes the stochastic process by which people accept ideas, by which viable ideas occur. And the reason it changes the stochastic process is that now there are two ways to have a viable idea at time t.